Welcome back to my Strapi course. Strapi includes a rich text box field type. This field provides the user with a rich text editor where he can input any type of rich text content like headings, block quotes, lists, pre-formatted text, anything. In the backend, when you retrieve that field with the RESTful API or GraphQL, the data type is an array of objects. In this video, I want to show you how you can render that rich text box field in a React environment. Alright, let's start the demo. As always, we're starting with an empty Strapi instance. I just bootstrap this. It's a Strapi quick starter with an SQLite database. The first thing I'll do is create some content type in which we can include the rich text content box. I will name the content type box. Let's store blog articles. They have rich text content after all. I'll change the singular API ID to blog, and I will disable the draft and publish functionality so that I can save faster. Need to fix the singular ID again. And I'll add a title field to my blog, which will be a short text field. And now we will add the rich text box. As I mentioned, the old field, the classic rich text editor in Strapi, is a markdown field. This rich text box field is the actual new field which we're going to explore, and the JSON it actually returns is what we're going to render. Let's add it now. I'll call the field name content. It will be the blog post content essentially. And I'll save my new content type. This is all I need for now. Now that the server restarted, I can go to Content Manager and create a new blog article. I'll open some Ellipsum generator with a couple of paragraphs so that I have content. I'll just add some title and a couple of paragraphs of text. So this is the rich text field. Once I paste my text, it inserts the paragraphs and some empty spaces between them. Now I can insert some additional elements as well. For example, headings at the very least. Let's add a few different sizes. Here I'll insert another one. And we can add other elements as well. Let's insert a testimonial, for example, a block quote. Here we have quote style, and I would also want a list. So let's turn this text into a list like this. Let's go with an unordered bulleted list. I'll go like this. Just a few items from the content. That's enough. We have a couple of items. As you can see, in general, the rich text editor supports headings, lists. You can insert images and code blocks. In fact, let's also add a code block. Why not? This is not code, to be honest, but actually, let's insert code. Just some HTML boilerplate, something extremely simple. All right. So this is a code block as well. And we have plenty of content now. I will save my blog post. And before I attempt to retrieve it with the API, I'll go to Settings, Users and Permissions plugin, Rows, and I will enable public users to access blog posts so that I'll be able to actually retrieve it. And now I can make a request. Was that the port? Yes. / API, blocks, and I get my blocks. I actually want the first blog post with ID 1. And here it is. I will collapse the content field. As expected, we get the item ID, and under attributes, we get our fields. We have the standard created at, updated at fields from Strapi, and the title field. Our content is an array of 12 items. These are 12 individual blocks. If I open again, each one of these is a block right here. And if I expand it, each item is an object and it has a type. In this case, the first block is a heading. It has children of type text, and this is the text node inside of it. And it has a level property. So basically, that's this block right here. It's heading, h3 more specifically, denoted by this level property, and then it has a textual node inside of it. This is how the nodes are represented in the rich text box editor. Now, of course, it's a challenge to render these. If you have to write a renderer yourself, you have to iterate through each content block and write some type of a parser which checks the type of the block and any other properties like level, and then builds some kind of HTML if you want to render it in an HTML environment. And you have to also insert the text node inside. The good thing is that to render this, Strapi have provided a React renderer, a box React renderer library, which you can use freely. So this is the open source, the GitHub repository for this open source renderer. It's under the Strapi organization. I will have included a link in the video description to this repository. But today we're going to use it in a React environment, more specifically in a Next.js environment. You can use this box renderer in any React application, which is not React Native, but uses the React document object model, the React DOM library. And here in the repository, you have instructions how to use it. It's quite straightforward. It's just a React component. So let's start by creating a Next.js application first, where we're going to render our blog post. I will open a terminal and let me zoom in a bit. I'll go to my drive. I have a folder, Strapi blocks, where is my Strapi application actually. And here I will create a new Next app with create Next app latest, and I'll call it Next app. I will go with no TypeScript and yes for everything else basically. Once it bootstraps, we'll resume the video. All right, the Next.js application just bootstrapped. I would cd into it and open it in VS Code now. I'll zoom a bit the interface. As always, I'll first delete some unnecessary files from the just bootstrap Next app, just some boilerplate or unnecessary items from my project. Here in the content, I'll remove everything in the main page.js file so that I just have one main tag, and I'll write home. There we go. I'll remove the image import as I don't need it anymore. In layout, I'll remove the inter font, but leave global CSS so that I have Tailwind. And here the inter class name in the body is not necessary too. In globals, I'll leave only the Tailwind directives at the top, and I can remove the two SVG icons from the public folder. All right, now I can start my Next.js app with npm run dev. And at this point, I expect a blank page with home. And here we go, just as expected. All right. Now, the next step is to check out the documentation for the renderer. The first step is to install it. Here we have npm and yarn commands, which also include React and React DOM. I will not need these as I already have them in my Next.js application as dependencies. So I'll just copy the Strapi box React renderer and stop the app and install the dependency. After it installs, here's the basic usage. We can start from there. I'll first restart the application so that it runs while I'm making the changes. I'll copy this line by line. First, we need to import the box renderer. Let me go to the page.js for the home page. Of course, this seems to be TypeScript. So in our case, I'll just import box renderer without the type. And here in this basic usage, they just define a simple content, box content as a variable in JavaScript. And they've left a comment that you would usually receive this from your Strapi API. But to test if the renderer is working, I will actually copy this variable, just to check if it will render this paragraph with some text. Again, this isn't TypeScript, so don't need the type. And then we just use the component. The usage is component box render, and it accepts content of the content array. Let's test this now. If I refresh, I should see a paragraph, and I do, with a textual note saying a simple paragraph. So the box render is set up and working. Now the next step is to go to the Strapi API and retrieve this blog post with a fetch request and render its content right here. Now let's do that. This is a Next.js application, so I can just write a function to fetch this post right here. An async function, of course. And what it will do is make a fetch request, this URL. It has to await it, of course. Then it will parse the response to JSON, and here in the response, we'll just console log it first to see what we receive, but it should be that JSON exactly. And now I can use that in my home component, and to do that, I have to make the function asynchronous. And I immediately after I save in my console server side, I get the response console log. And it's exactly as expected, response, data, and then I get the ID and attributes. So basically the response data is my blog post. So I can just return that. All right. So now my post is this object right here, which includes ID, attributes, content. And to do that properly, I can just change this content variable with post attributes content. And I can remove this hard-coded content right here. Let's save, make this more. And here we go. We actually have our HTML. As this is Tailwind CSS, everything is normalized and looks kind of similar, but we'll fix that right now. But we have our pre-formatted text, our block quote, everything. The headings. Now in Tailwind, we have the typography plugin, which allows us to quickly format text with this pros class. But to do so, we have to install it. This documentation article will also be linked in the video description. You just have to install the Tailwind CSS typography as a preferably as a dev dependency in your project. And in the Tailwind CSS config, right here under plugins, to include it with a require statement. And I think that's it. Yeah, that's it. So now I can start the project. And I can go back to my page and I'll apply the style directly to my main tag. It will be prose, MX Auto to center it because prose also includes max width for readability. And I'll add some y-axis margin so that we have spacing on top and the bottom. I'll just specify 10. So let's refresh now, see what we get. There we go. So this is basically this typography plugin. Unsets the normalizations of everything in Tailwind, the most basic styles to a sensible typographic defaults, like this block quote style, the styles for headings. As you can see, we have a preformatted text and list styles, which are very basic, but they look great and they're optimized for a good reading experience. With this, I wrap today's video. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to subscribe to get notified when another video is released. Take care.